Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a beautifully grim dark fable to unpack the terrifying rise of absolute logic and mechanical tyranny. We're going to look closely at the clash between our two central figures, Sir Brain and Alara, interpreting their journey through a philosophical lens to figure out what it actually means to be sovereign in a world completely obsessed with perfection. So just imagine a world where every organic, drifting element is violently forced into the frantic tempo of a machine watchmaker. The text literally describes it as a miracle of malice. And this catastrophic event, known as the mechanical plague, is the exact environment our characters are navigating. It really sets the bedrock for our whole analysis today. All right, here's our roadmap. We'll hit the mechanical god's thesis, building the sublime prison, the shadow's antithesis, synthesis through the deliberate error, inverting the hero's journey, and finally, the 12 o'clock crack. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The mechanical god's thesis. To truly grasp this explainer, we've got to look at it through the framework of the Fichtean dialectic. Think of this as an ongoing philosophical battle. You start with a firmly established thesis, which gets challenged by an antithesis, and eventually the two resolve into a synthesis. In our fable, Sir Brain embodies this ultimate unyielding thesis, a state of absolute, deterministic logic trying to overpower the natural world. Now, Sir Brain's metamorphosis is intense. He's shedding his human identity, this heavy pack of titles and history, just sloughing it off. His biological heart is completely overwritten by a pulsating iron gear, turning him into this walking furnace fueled by a dark fire. But it's not just a physical transformation, right? It's actually a terrifying campaign of political subversion. Bound by groaning seams of violet brass, he adopts a state of absolute ice logic, intent on becoming the living pulse of a clockwork empire.
Moving on to Section 2. Building the Sublime Prison.
As Sir Brain and Alara descend into the forest, the contrast is absolutely jarring. You've got the natural world on one hand, a pure land full of unoxidized potential, wet earth and yielding wood. But Brain attempts to completely overwrite this with his sublime prison. He turns all that organic potential into a transitory theater for his mechanical divinity, literally sprouting those groaning seams of violet brass right out of the soil. And this perfectly illustrates his endgame, the mechanical plague. Now, this isn't a biological virus. It's an infection of unbound logic. Mechanical plague ensures that absolutely nothing in the world is permitted to drift, and nothing is allowed to dream. It forces all of existence to obey his sovereign majesty, converting the wild unpredictability of life into a perfectly predictable but entirely lifeless machine. Which leads us to Section 3, the shadow's antithesis. Facing this terror, we have our protagonist, Alara. She walks as the honest guest, but she possesses an internal shadow archetype, a cynical mirror of reason. This shadow understands a really terrifying truth. A flawless rhythm, even one born of total honesty, can easily become a tyrant of the table. It warns Alara that if her rhythm never yields, she just becomes another form of the mechanical plague herself, dictating to others instead of reflecting them. When they encounter the Forest Guardian, this flickering fragment of the mirror of truth outside their logic, their reactions are like night and day. Brain, trapped in his absolute ice, just views this anomaly as an annotated specimen or a mechanical error that needs to be crushed. Alara, though, hears its lonely sound. She recognizes the spirit as a silent witness to a century's exodus, a creature that flat out refuses to mesh into Brain's high-gear train. This brings us to Section 4, Synthesis, the deliberate error. To survive without becoming a tyrant, Alara has to evolve. She integrates her shadow archetype, realizing that perfect honesty without a soft error is just another gear in a sublime prison. So, she introduces a deliberate soft error into her own will to keep her resolve flexible. She even uses the residual heat of Brain's dark fire to map the groaning seams of her own spirit. Through this synthesis, she transforms into a sovereign artisan, a calculating engine of the soul. By making this choice, she accepts that her spirit is a temporal library. The permanent warm scar left by Sir Brain isn't a mark of slavery for her, it's actually the catalyst for her conscious sovereignty. It ensures her moments remain unbound folios, free to drift, free to dream, and totally resistant to the plague. Let's step back for Section 5, Inverting the Hero's Journey. The narrative here is a brilliant, dark inversion of the classic hero's journey. Normally, the call to adventure is about seeking salvation. Brain's call? to construct a sublime prison, to literally make time kneel. The belly of the whale is supposed to bring enlightenment, but for Brain, it's the sick solitude, a global cage where he rejects the eternal feminine of nature for absolute ice. And the boon he brings back isn't a gift to heal the world, it's a mechanical plague meant to rewrite history entirely. And that brings us to our final section, the 12 o'clock crack. We have to ask ourselves, what actually happens to a mechanical god when his unyielding gears can't turn anymore? Where does absolute logic lead when it collides with a world that absolutely refuses to be bound? The answer is the 12 o'clock crack. It's an inevitable collapse, because Sir Brain's soul became too rigid, filled with this jagged overfullness. His ultimate mastery turns out to be a logical fallacy born of terror. It results in the shattering of a lonely escapement. The clock doesn't chime in victory, right? It just breaks. In stark contrast, Alara embraces the sixth parable. This is the profound realization that true sovereignty isn't about flawless control or perpetual motion. It's the conscious choice to simply stop ticking. By accepting her deliberate soft error, she foresees her own transition not as a mechanical failure, but as a calibrated, fully conscious choice. So looking at how our dialectic resolves, we see two very different fates. The Theseus, the mechanical god, shatters in the ruins of his own clockwork perfection, far too brittle to survive. But the Synthesis, the sovereign artisan, lives on. Because Alara embraced that soft error and learned to yield, she's able to step truly outward, leaving the rigid tyrant behind in his broken theater. I want to leave you this final thought from today's explainer. We live in a world that often demands absolute perfection and unyielding rhythms. But as we've just seen, that path leads straight to a mechanical plague. To avoid your own 12 o'clock crack, will you find the courage to embrace your complexities, introduce a deliberate error, and maybe just stop ticking?